Most people think humidity is just something you live with. That sticky feeling in the air, the smell in the basement, the fogged up windows, the damp closet that somehow always feels wrong. And for years, Americans were told the answer was simple. Buy a machine, plug it in, listen to it hum all night while your electric bill quietly climbs higher every month. But decades before modern dehumidifiers became normal, people living in brutally humid places already knew another method existed. A method so simple most people today completely ignore it when they see it sitting on a hardware store shelf. And strangely enough, some old-timers still swear it works better in small rooms than expensive electric units, especially during blackouts, especially in garages, especially in old houses where moisture seems to come from nowhere. What makes this even stranger is that the entire system starts with something most people walk past without a second thought. A plain white material that looks almost useless, cheap, dry, forgettable. But once it's exposed to air, it starts pulling water out of the room almost immediately. Not slowly, aggressively, almost unnaturally. And if you've never seen this happen in person before, the first time feels fake, because the material doesn't just absorb a little moisture. Sometimes it becomes soaked, heavy, warm, dripping, like it somehow created water from nothing. That reaction alone is what made some survival-minded homeowners start experimenting with it years ago, especially people living along the Gulf Coast, deep southern states, and older rural properties where humidity never really leaves, because once moisture gets into a room, it changes everything. Wood swells, tools rust, clothes develop that strange stale smell, paper curls, walls sweat. And the worst part is, modern homes often trap humidity instead of removing it. People don't realize this, but many older American homes were accidentally better at breathing. Tiny air leaks, loose construction, attic ventilation, crawl space airflow, imperfect by modern standards, but sometimes better at preventing trapped moisture. Then homes became tighter, sealed, insulated, energy efficient, and suddenly people started fighting invisible dampness everywhere. Bathrooms, laundry rooms, cabinets, campers, basements, storage sheds, even vehicles. That's why the old trick started resurfacing online again during storm seasons and blackout discussions, especially after major hurricanes when people lost power for days and realized humidity becomes a completely different kind of problem once air conditioning disappears. Because heat is one thing, humidity is another. Humidity changes how your lungs feel, how your clothes feel, how you sleep, how a room smells. And once moisture settles into a closed room for long enough, the atmosphere starts feeling strangely heavy, almost alive. That's where the dry bucket method quietly started returning. No motor, no compressor, no electricity, just chemistry. And the strange part is, the main ingredient was never designed specifically for homeowners in the first place. It became popular for completely different reasons. Shipping companies used it, warehouses used it, industrial storage used it, people transporting sensitive equipment used it. Because inside sealed containers crossing oceans, humidity becomes dangerous fast. One trapped pocket of moisture can destroy entire shipments from condensation alone. So industries started relying on materials that naturally pull water molecules out of surrounding air. Some people know these materials from tiny packets found inside shoeboxes or electronics packaging. Those little warning packets most people instantly throw away. But the stronger version is different, much stronger. And unlike the tiny silica packets, this stuff can transform dramatically after exposure to humid air. Some versions harden, some liquefy, some release heat. And one particular type became legendary among DIY humidity control communities because of how absurdly cheap it was compared to powered dehumidifiers, especially in small spaces. 5-gallon buckets, closets, RVs, tool sheds, gun safes, storage rooms, even boats. That's where people started noticing something strange. In certain environments, moisture would begin disappearing within hours. Windows cleared up, odors weakened. That sticky air sensation changed. And in tiny enclosed rooms, the effect sometimes felt bigger than expected. Not magical, not infinite, but shockingly effective for something that costs less than a fast food meal. The strange thing is, most people have actually seen this material before without realizing what it was. Winter sidewalks, driveways, hardware stores, farm supply buildings, concrete aisles stacked with heavy white bags, because one of the most powerful moisture-absorbing compounds commonly used in these setups is actually sold for an entirely different purpose. And that's where the story gets weird, because once people discovered how aggressively this material reacted with moisture, they started experimenting with homemade passive dehumidifier systems everywhere. Some setups were crude, a plastic bucket with holes, a tray underneath, a mesh screen, nothing sophisticated, but the results kept spreading through forums, prepper communities, RV groups, and old rural maintenance circles. especially among people trying to control dampness without increasing power usage. Because electric dehumidifiers have a hidden downside nobody talks about enough: heat. They generate warmth while running. Which means in already hot environments, they can make rooms feel even more uncomfortable unless air conditioning balances everything out. But passive systems stay silent, cold, motionless, no hum, no fan noise, no extension cords, no moving parts. And during outages, that suddenly matters a lot more than people expect, especially after storms, especially in hurricane-prone states where moisture invades homes within hours after power failure. That's why some emergency preparedness communities started quietly stockpiling these materials years ago, not because they replace modern systems entirely, but because they keep working when everything else stops. And once you understand what the material is actually doing at a molecular level, the whole thing becomes even stranger, because technically, it's not drying the room the way most people imagine. It's hunting water, pulling invisible moisture molecules directly out of surrounding air and trapping them through chemical attraction, which sounds almost science fiction until you physically watch the container fill with liquid over time. That's the moment most people stop laughing at the idea, because seeing water appear from dry air changes how you think about humidity completely. And the first time someone opens a bucket after a few days in a damp garage, the reaction is almost always the same. How is there this much water in the air? That question alone is what pulled thousands of people deeper into these forgotten low-power moisture control systems. Not because they looked impressive, but because they exposed something modern homeowners rarely think about. Your house is constantly holding water in the walls, in the air, under the floor, inside fabric, inside wood, inside insulation. And once you notice it, you start seeing humidity differently everywhere you go. The strangest part about the entire dry bucket system is that it doesn't look important. That's probably why most people ignore it. There's no glowing screen, no futuristic branding, no smart home app tracking moisture levels in real time, just a bucket, a cheap material, and water slowly appearing where there wasn't any before, but hidden inside that simplicity is something most modern homeowners never stop to think about. Air itself is carrying weight, not metaphorical weight. Actual water, gallons of it, especially in southern states during summer. In places like Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi, or coastal Texas, the air can feel thick enough to drink. Old mechanics used to joke that certain garages were sweating harder than people. And weirdly enough, they weren't completely wrong. Because humidity doesn't stay politely suspended in the air forever. It moves, clings, collects, crawls into places you never intended. Toolboxes, cardboard boxes, attics, rifle cases, breaker panels, old wiring. People think rust comes from time, but moisture is usually the real killer hiding underneath everything. That's why old farmers and workshop owners became obsessed with dryness long before modern climate control systems became common, especially people protecting metal. Because once moisture gets trapped around steel for long enough, the process becomes relentless. A wrench forgotten in a humid shed can slowly change color. Chrome dulls, edges pit, tiny orange spots appear from nowhere. And once the corrosion starts, it almost feels alive. That's one reason the dry bucket trick spread so aggressively among garage communities online. Not because people wanted comfort, but because they were watching expensive tools decay in silence. And the crazy thing is, many of them discovered the problem accidentally, usually after storms, or after moving into older homes, or after noticing that certain rooms always smelled strange no matter how much cleaning they did. That smell matters more than people realize because humidity has a scent, not directly, but through what it awakens. Old wood, fabric, dust, drywall, mold spores hiding deep behind walls. The human brain recognizes dampness instantly even when people can't explain it. There's a reason basements in old American homes feel psychologically different the moment you walk downstairs. Your body senses moisture before your brain consciously processes it. And for some people, that feeling becomes unbearable after a while. Sticky bed sheets, heavy breathing at night, closets that never fully smell clean, shoes that feel cold and damp in the morning. That's when people start looking for alternatives. And oddly enough, many end up finding the same material over and over again: calcium chloride. A plain industrial compound that looks almost disappointingly ordinary until it starts reacting with air. Then it becomes something else entirely. Because calcium chloride doesn't just collect water. It chemically attracts moisture molecules so aggressively that the material eventually transforms itself. Dry crystals become clumps. Clumps become sludge. Sometimes sludge becomes liquid. And that transformation is exactly what shocks people the first time they try the method, especially in severely humid rooms. Because the speed feels unnatural. One day the bucket looks dry, a few days later there's liquid sitting underneath it, no electricity involved, no moving machinery, just silent extraction happening 24 hours a day. That's what gives the trick its strange reputation online, not because it replaces full house systems, but because the process feels almost primitive and futuristic at the same time, like discovering forgotten chemistry hiding in plain sight. And once people start experimenting with it, they usually begin noticing something else too. Modern homes are far wetter than they appear, especially newer construction. That sounds backwards, but tighter homes trap enormous amounts of moisture generated by normal daily life. Cooking, showering, laundry, breathing. Even sleeping releases moisture into the air constantly. A family inside a sealed home can release gallons of water vapor into the environment without realizing it. Then winter arrives. Windows fog, corners feel cold, closets smell stale. And suddenly people think something is wrong with the house when really the moisture simply has nowhere to go. Older generations accidentally solved some of these problems through ventilation. Drafty homes wasted energy, but they also allowed moisture to escape naturally. Modern efficiency changed that equation. Now homes hold on to everything: heat, air, humidity, odors. That's why passive moisture systems started becoming fascinating again during the off-grid movement, because people began asking uncomfortable questions. What happens if power disappears for weeks? What happens during storms? What happens if fuel becomes expensive? What happens when climate systems fail? The average suburban home today depends heavily on continuous electricity just to maintain basic indoor comfort. Remove that electricity and many homes begin transforming within hours. Heat rises, humidity builds, air stagnates, and suddenly people realize how fragile normal comfort actually is. That realization changed how many preparedness-minded Americans started thinking about their homes entirely, not as shelters, but as systems. Systems that require airflow, moisture control, temperature regulation, backup methods, redundancy. That's why the dry bucket trick became bigger than just a cheap hack. For some people, it represented something deeper. Independence. The ability to solve small environmental problems without needing a machine for everything. And the most fascinating part is that these methods aren't new at all. Versions of passive moisture control existed decades ago in boats, military storage, storm shelters, cargo transport, and rural maintenance buildings, long before internet DIY culture rediscovered them. Because older generations understood something modern culture quietly forgot. Moisture destroys things slowly, silently, patiently, and by the time people notice visible damage, the process has usually been happening for months, sometimes years. That's why certain old-timers obsess over keeping air dry even when the room itself feels fine. Because they know what humidity does when nobody's looking. The underside of floorboards, the inside of electrical panels, the back corners of closets, the hidden side of drywall, tiny invisible zones where air barely moves. Those are the places moisture loves most. And weirdly enough, passive systems work best in exactly those forgotten spaces, not giant open living rooms, not entire houses, but enclosed pockets of trapped humidity modern airflow never reaches properly. That's where people started seeing the biggest surprises. Storage bins staying dry, RVs losing that swampy smell, safes protecting valuables better, small cabins feeling less oppressive during humid months. And the deeper people explored these systems, the more they started realizing something uncomfortable. Modern convenience made most people forget basic environmental awareness completely. Most Americans today can tell you their Wi-Fi password faster than they can explain how moisture moves through their own house. But older generations noticed these details instinctively. Condensation patterns, window sweating, wood expansion, metal corrosion, air movement. Because when you live closer to the environment, you start reading your surroundings differently. And once someone notices how aggressively moisture invades enclosed spaces, they stop seeing humidity as just weather. They start seeing it as a hidden force constantly shaping the inside of their home. Once people start paying attention to moisture, they begin noticing things they can never unsee again. The smell inside old closets, the cold, damp feeling hidden behind stored blankets, the strange way cardboard softens in garages over time. Even certain houses have a look to them, a kind of invisible heaviness in the air that makes rooms feel older than they actually are. And the unsettling part is that most homeowners never realize what's happening until humidity leaves visible scars behind. Dark ceiling corners, warped trim, peeling paint, fogged windows, rust spreading across tools that looked perfectly fine a month earlier. But the real damage usually starts long before that. That's what made passive moisture control communities grow so quickly online. People weren't just trying to make rooms feel more comfortable anymore. They were trying to stop slow, invisible decay happening inside places they cared about, especially after expensive lessons. A flooded basement, a ruined firearm collection, a mold problem hidden behind drywall, an RV that smelled permanently off after one humid summer. And strangely enough, Many of the people who became obsessed with these systems were not survivalists at first. They became survival-minded after watching modern systems fail unexpectedly. Storms, power outages, broken HVAC systems during heat waves, rising utility bills. That's when people started rediscovering something older generations already understood instinctively. A house is never truly passive. It's constantly fighting the environment around it. And humidity is one of the most relentless enemies in that fight because it moves silently. No alarms, no warning lights, no dramatic moment. Just slow pressure. Day after day. Molecule by molecule. That's why the dry trick fascinated people so much once they saw it working in real life. Not because it looked impressive, but because it exposed how much invisible water was surrounding them all the time. And nowhere does this become more obvious than inside sealed spaces. Gun safes, storage containers, boats, trailers, basements, closets. Tiny enclosed areas where airflow barely exists. That's where passive dehumidifying materials become almost eerie to watch. Because the reaction becomes faster, more aggressive, sometimes shocking. People open a bucket after several days and find inches of collected liquid underneath material that originally looked bone dry. That moment changes how many people think about air itself. Because most Americans imagine humidity as feeling sticky. But humidity is physical, real, heavy. The air around you is carrying water constantly, and in certain climates the amount becomes enormous. Some preparedness communities even started calling humidity the invisible flood because unlike storms, it enters slowly and continuously. Every single day, especially in southern states, especially near coastlines, especially in poorly ventilated rooms. And what's fascinating is that some old buildings accidentally resisted this better than modern homes, not because they were advanced, because they breathed. Old barns, farmhouses, workshops, cabins, structures built before hypersealed construction became normal often allowed enough natural airflow to prevent moisture from becoming trapped for long periods. Modern efficiency reversed that. Now many homes behave almost like containers, excellent for temperature control, terrible when ventilation fails. That realization became especially important during major blackout events, because people discovered something disturbing very quickly. Without power, indoor humidity becomes psychological. Rooms begin feeling oppressive. Bedsheets feel damp, walls feel warmer, air feels heavier every hour. That's when many homeowners started experimenting with completely non-electric environmental systems for the first time in their lives. Not because they wanted to go off-grid, because comfort suddenly became fragile. And the weirdest part about the dry bucket method is how primitive it looks compared to the problem it's solving. No circuitry, no smart sensors, no software updates, just chemistry silently doing its job, almost like something from another era. That simplicity created a strange emotional reaction in a lot of people. Because deep down, many Americans are becoming exhausted by systems that only function when every modern convenience remains operational. Apps. Subscriptions, power grids, Wi-Fi, automation. The dry trick felt different, quiet, independent, mechanical in an almost old-world way, and once people saw it working during outages, they started asking bigger questions. What else did previous generations know that modern culture abandoned? What other obsolete systems still work perfectly well? That curiosity loop is what pulled many people deeper into preparedness culture entirely. Not fear, curiosity. Because once someone sees a simple bucket silently removing moisture from a room without consuming electricity, the modern world suddenly feels a little stranger, especially when the setup costs less than dinner. That contrast bothers people. A loud, expensive machine versus a silent chemical reaction hidden inside a plastic container. It feels backwards, almost insulting. And yet, in certain environments, the results become impossible to ignore. That's why RV owners became some of the biggest believers in passive dehumidification methods. Small enclosed spaces reveal humidity problems fast. Metal frames sweat. Cabinets trap moisture. Fabric absorbs dampness. And once mildew enters a confined space, removing the smell becomes almost impossible. So people began placing passive drying systems everywhere, under sinks, near windows, inside storage compartments, near tool chests, around plumbing areas. Some even started experimenting with different container designs to maximize airflow around the material. Because once you understand the process, you realize the system is almost alive in a strange way. The material wants moisture. It actively hunts for it. And humid air keeps feeding it continuously. That's why placement matters so much. Corners with poor airflow, low areas where dampness settles, rooms without sunlight, places humans instinctively avoid spending time in for long periods. Those are the environments where moisture quietly builds its kingdom. And strangely enough, humans often sense these places emotionally before understanding them logically. People say things like, "This room feels weird," This basement feels heavy. The garage smells strange. What they're often detecting is trapped moisture affecting the environment psychologically, because humans evolved reading environmental signals constantly. Wetness, rot, air quality, ventilation. Even before modern science explained humidity, people instinctively avoided damp enclosed places for survival reasons. That ancient instinct never disappeared. Modern climate control simply masked it for a while. But once power fails, or moisture problems become visible, those instincts come roaring back immediately. That's part of why the dry trick spread so aggressively through YouTube, forums, and preparedness circles. Not because it was revolutionary, because it felt forgotten. Like uncovering a practical piece of American environmental knowledge that somehow slipped through the cracks of modern convenience. And the deeper people explored it, the more they realized the real story was never about the bucket itself. It was about dependence.